Good afternoon, fellow wargamers. It's Jason again, and hope you guys are having a great Saturday afternoon. This is when I'm filming this, and as I've mentioned a couple times, I did want to talk a little bit about ways that we can consider, spicing up our war games. One of the ways to do that, I think, is to break out of the normal set battle rule reports, or sorry, not battle reports, set scenarios that are featured in the basic rule book. So what I want to talk about today was actually two books, or parts of two books. The first of which is this. It's the Warhammer Generals Compendium. Now this came out some time ago, put out by Games Workshop, obviously. And it's for Warhammer, not 40K, so it's fantasy, my personal favorite. And I'm just going to do a quick run through the book, focus on some things that I thought were particularly interesting, do a kind of a mini review of the book itself, and then talk about another source that I think I would be surprised if many of you have seen or thought to look at. I know I hadn't for a long time until somebody pointed out to me. But let's start with this first. So this was put out about 10 years ago, I believe. It's a pretty hefty book. It comes in at, let's see, how many pages does this run? 175 pages. And it's intended, or it's advertised to be just kind of the ultimate source to do narrative games, scenarios, and then longer term campaigns. So let's just flip through a little bit. And I got this off eBay, I got this off eBay. I think I paid about $20. And a quick look on eBay, at least the US site over the weekend, showed that there's a couple out there, they run about $30. So I'll let you decide whether or not you think that this is something worth picking up. I think it is, personally, and I hope to use it more in the future. And I did use it in a recent battle report. With mixed success, I think that the scenarios were really interesting. I didn't play them very well. I kept forgetting the rules. Anyways, so the first thing that you see is in my particular version, hopefully yours would have this, is a set of campaign counters. We'll get into that a little bit more in the future. So here is everything. Let me get my adult beverage out of the way here really quick. So here is kind of everything that the table of contents. So you've got the first thing you start out with is linked campaigns, and essentially it's how to build your own campaign. GW sells a lot of campaigns. They just did Border Princes, which actually features in here as well, that I purchased for my iPad. But it tells you here about how to build your own, which I think is really fun and interesting. And you've got map-based campaigns, which I have never done before. So that's right over here. And it goes through different ways to do that and different custom rules for each of the armies. And then there's a separate one, Campaigning on the Land of the Border Princes. That one's down here. And different scenarios that they have for that. And then they have game-mastered campaigns, and that's almost like role-playing, or somebody is arbitrating or refereeing the fight. And those look like a lot of fun, too, and we'll flip through those. And then you've got competitive gaming. This is more, and it's not, I think, the way we think of it, but it's more grudge matches, death matches, hidden setups. So you drape a sheet over one person's side, and you take the sheet off. So when the battle starts, nobody has seen the other person's deployment, which I think would be a lot of fun. Hostile terrain, and that's actually what I used in my recent Bretonia versus Beastman. Allies and multiplayer game was something that I particularly was interested in because on a couple of occasions, my gaming group here, we've got an odd number of people. And so trying to figure out, and that's actually why I bought this book, was to try to look at some ways where you could have multiplayer games beyond just two people. Normally 3 or 5. And then the last one I thought was the most interesting. I think this is showing up. Boats in Warhammer. I've never seen this before, and I really would like to do it. I'm not sure if I'm crafty enough to make the actual boats, but that sounds like it could be a whole lot of fun. And again, and there's detailed rules. We'll flip through that. And then lastly, the next chapter is sieges, raids, and city sacking. So again, hopefully you've gotten the general sense that this book brings across is there's rules for pretty much everything that can really kind of spice up your gaming if you're looking for something more than just showing up at your FLGS or Games Workshop and picking up a game. So let's just flip through the book. I'm not going to stop on every page because there's 175 of them. That's going to take a while. Initial thoughts are, you can tell the book's a bit dated, and there's some rules issues that come up because it's just a, I don't know if this is 7th edition or it might even be 6th edition Warhammer. So there is some kind of conversion that you're going to have to do. They talk a lot about unit sizes and unit strength and things along those lines. Or they refer back to the basic rule book of yore, not the current one, which as of making this video is 8th edition. Excuse me. But obviously some of the models are a little bit older too, so it's kind of fun to get a kick out of when you don't have hordes of 5,000 troops on the board. It's a little bit older. So link campaigns, they kind of go through. It's really well written. It's what I wish. I'm having a hard time with the. Sorry, folks, if this shakes a little bit. Hard time with the zoom here, so I'm not really getting the full page. It's a pretty decent sized book. It just basically gives an overview of it. It goes into depth on how to make a campaign, and something that I wish the new White Dwarf would consider doing. And clearly they've gone the complete other direction based on Warhammer Visions and all those things. But this is a book if you really want to get your teeth into a really in-depth campaign. If you want to get into the nitty-gritty details of scenarios and things like that, this is the book. This is the book to do it with. So here's a couple examples. Just a quick campaign, and it just gives you game 1, 2, and 3, and they give different scenarios for each. Or a guerrilla tactics or skirmishing. They've got rules for skirmishers in here. And then you can do a 2-day battle. So you've got here game 1 pitch battle, game 2 rally around the flag, and then game 3 is pitch battle. So if you want to do something even more kind of I won't say extreme, but something that's going to take a lot longer, is a series of battles. Looks like there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 total games in this. And this is something that somebody who wants to do a tournament could do, or again, a really extended campaign. And they've got rules for all this stuff in here. So I need to flip through this a little bit faster. It's taking way too long. So here's some of the rules. Excuse me, feeling a little under the weather. And all the scenarios, and just for example, so you can do scouts and pickets. I'll do the first one up here. In this skirmish scenario, the Homeland Force takes the role of pickets, the aggressors take the role of scouts. And it goes through what each of these means, and then campaign results, it allows you to tweak the later battles, so you get extra points. And I've seen Wargaming for Fun do things like this lately, and some others. But then it's just a series of, just like you got in the back of the basic rule book, of rules. And so aggressors versus Homeland Force pickets, you're talking 175 points versus 125 points of core choices. Oops, that's right down here. So again, you're talking a very small game, which is interesting because I think we're used to Warhammer used to really large ones. And then, so this one, it's Desperation Defense, and it's just a whole really interesting deployment, ways to spice things up. I had heard of Grom the Paunch, so you can tell this guy's a bit old, but it gives special rules for a particular set of models here. And you can see how dated the book perhaps is, because those are definitely some older models. And I think they might still actually be out there. Some more skirmishing, and then spaced throughout are another thing that I really like to see is how to make some of this terrain. So if you want to go through and use that for ideas. And then you've got delaying tactics. Here's one that you probably wouldn't think of. Oops, my working Black Templar encroaching on the game. Rafts in the river. So if you ever want to have rules for fording a river with rafts, here you go. So a lot of stuff. And then Chapter 2, map-based campaigns. Oops, let me see if I can keep this on the video. And it talks about making the maps, headquarters territories, and I think a lot of this you can find now probably in Blood in the Badlands. But this is a way, if you don't want to buy that book, or you want some different rules, or to actually make a map, they talk about doing it here, this is a way to do it. And then it goes through how campaign turns work, the orders you can do, submitting orders, here's an example. Raising, how you raise things on a map. And then, of course, here's another example of how to make terrain for your games. Some pretty pictures. Yeah, and so here's an example, retreating after battle. That's clearly, what's the tile-based campaign setup that GW is putting out now, but you can do it without them. It's cheaper this way. And then you got some fun stuff. So army-specific rules. So here's obviously a dated one. Beasts of Chaos don't exist anymore. Chaos Dwarves do exist. Forge World. I've heard a lot of guffing about Chaos Dwarves of late, the Forge World ones, but they've got rules for them here, so I'm going to say they're justified. So Hordes of Chaos Demons, Hordes of Chaos Mortals. So you have to tweak some of the stuff for the current battle armies. So again, it just adds some flavor. Let's kind of skip ahead. Victory conditions. Here's a nice big map that they put together that you could do. Again, it takes some work on your part. This isn't something where, you know, this is just going to fall in your lap and you can run everything. There's some research to be done, but it's a great reference. It's a great resource. So here's the campaigning, the Border Princes campaign. This is very similar to the one that GW just put out for the iPad, which I actually own and like a lot and could review if people are interested. But again, just interspersed in this is nice stuff. How to make a barrow out of foam. I don't think a lot of us spend enough time making terrain to make the board a little bit more interesting. Dixie cups should not be terrain in my humble opinion. But then you got a scenario battle for the barrows. You can make a border prince fort. Stuff that I might like to do someday. Another scenario, rock labyrinth, and the different rules for that. So let's skip ahead here a little bit. And then chapter 4, so you've got game mastered campaigns. And it talks about how one person kind of oversees the campaign, or they're the only one that sees the full scope of what's going on. They kind of control what the players are doing. Again, this is for those of you that like doing the role-playing game bit a little bit more, or would have a player, you know, that doesn't feel like playing but wants to be involved in the campaign. This would be a perfect way to do it. And there's some more eye candy. This is some incredible modeling, the kind that you don't see in Games Workshop publications anymore. You know, just kind of examples of how to play this stuff. So I can't tell. Yeah, this is all. So it's not Epic 40K. What's the 15 mil scale? But still, pretty incredible stuff. And then just more rules, talks about movement. Let me try to get this back on so you guys can actually see things here. Again, just tons of rules. It's almost a bit rule heavy, but man, if you need a table or something, random events table, confusing orders, weather roll in the weather chart. It just adds a lot of fun and variety into the game so it doesn't get boring. Army-specific glorious tidings. So, my Bretonians, will the lady until the next season to end phase. All Bretonian units may reroll failed psychology tests. So again, it's just fun stuff for playing well. And then another example of Game Master Campaign Showcase. So here's the old Chaos War Mammoth and some other things that they've made in here. Again, the art does look a little dated, but it's not bad. And then, so here's competitive gaming. And we think competitive gamers now. We think cheese lists and things along those lines. In this, though, this is more, I think, it's fun. So you could print out this card and say, you're challenging you to a death match. Or over here's an example of hidden deployments, like I was mentioning before, where you actually don't let the other person see where you're deploying. And then accepting challenges, scenarios, and some of the things I liked about these scenarios is they're not necessarily 2,500 points versus 2,500 points. This one is the attacker has 2,500, the defender has 1,250, but there's special rules to kind of mitigate this, and you see how long you can hold out. And then, so here's for hostile terrain. This is what I used for my Bretonia versus Beastmen battle reports. You've got a really interesting one for Beastmen and Wood Elf players. So you have a terrain board that's covered with trees, and you have the special rules for those. And they give those in here. You know, here's a way to make some really cool woods and things, or lava. Here's combat on a river. I'm thinking of There's a fairly famous battle for those of you where the Knights Templar were defeated in Russia. They charged over river and fell in. So that's, again, you could redo something like that. And this is what I played in the Bretonnia Bat Rep. I merged the Oasis' Hours and Battle Amid the Dunes, and it didn't change the game that much. Added some spice, I think. Here's playing on lava, or playing in the realms of chaos, past the edge of reason. And so for some of the special rules, you've got the Eldritch Pool, which you roll a 2d6 and something happens each turn, and then Spawn Infestation. Let's see, what's that rule? That rule is down here. And that says, the battlefield is littered with the cast-off champions of yesterday's favor. The center of each board quarter contains D2 spawn. Each board quarter contains spawn of a different power. The spawn go first at the start of each turn. Each individual spawn uses the scatter die to determine its direction, but the spawn could charge. So basically, it's just adding a bit of variation. So you've got random spawn charging all across your board. And then here, you've got allies and multiplayer games. They've got some of this in the basic rulebook, but I don't think people pay attention to it that much. And so this is the allies chart. Everybody's dreading how if GW could formalize allies inside Warhammer Fantasy games in the next edition, what could happen? Well, you kind of can do it now. It's not a percentage of your army, but like here's a good example of ways. So you can either min-max. And they talk about the pros and cons of min-maxing when you're having allies. Min-maxing is a shorthand term for minimizing weaknesses and maximizing strengths. We would call that, I think, cheesy kind of now. But so they talk about trying to strike a balance between the min-maxing or just going domination, where you just kind of go all out with one. You go out all out with heavy infantry or something. And he just gives advice on how to consider doing this, and the risks of taking any particular, going in one particular direction. You've got to, if there's two armies that are going to be allies, they give options for starting off with a duel to see who's the commanding general, and what that means. And then you've got some scenarios in here. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. That wasn't too loud. Okay, I need to do better with the camera work. And then multiplayer scenario 2, communications breakdown. It talks about how if the two armies aren't communicating well. This is one of those things I wish Warhammer would do better, is every time you give an order a particular unit, it always works. And a lot of other war games, they have an order system. You give so many orders per turn. This is a nice, I think, something you could choose to do or institute in an 8th edition game. And again, just a ton of scenarios to go through that you could use. You don't have to do this big campaign, but it's just something, again, if you're going to have a Saturday night game, why not do something a little different? So I'm going to skip ahead. And here you're talking about, maybe for those thinking about doing a tournament, multiplayer scenarios, so 2 battlefields, 4 players, 4 or more armies. So you've got fights going on 2 separate tables. Oops. And so that's I think, again, just a ton of examples of different things to do. And then this one I thought was the most interesting. Boats in Warhammer. It goes through here, types of ships, steam versus air, talks about, or wind-driven, talks about ways of making a ship if you want to, the size of ships. Here's a dinghy, small, medium, large, how many people you can get on it. War machines, there's crew, different things that you can do. And they've got the showcase here if you want to have a sea battle. And they give rules here for maneuvering, how often you can turn. So I could really see this. I've got a bunch of Marauders that don't see a lot of use, but building Viking warships to simulate a raid on Empire or Bretonnia. You got moving by steam, moving by magic, grappling, ramming, running aground, any number of things that you could show, that you could simulate. There's a rule for it. And I can't say that I've played a lot of these, so that I can't tell if the rules are under or overwhelming, but it does give a lot of cool ideas. So then they give some things that you could bump into in the ocean: a spiny sea serpent, sharks, great tentacled beasts, rules for things that you might like to have. Excuse me again, I'm sorry, gents. And then the last chapter is on sieges, raids, and city sacking. And again, those I think you can probably find in the Blood and the Badlands rule set. But again, it's just something handy to have here. Storm the Watchtower, different scenarios. Oops, pardon me. And has rules in here for war machines. Some of the stuff needs to be tweaked, I think, a little bit for 8th edition, but it gives a lot of great examples, things that you could fold into these games if you wanted to, without having to spend quite as much money. Here's the old Defend the Pass rulebook. So, it talks about having a proper siege, castles in the Warhammer world. You can have poison gas or traps or a swivel gun, and it gives point values for each of those and what they can do. Camouflage. Here's a scenario where you have to have a defensive area. So here's an example of something worth reading over. Again, it sounds like could be a lot of fun to do. Castles are usually built in strategically important areas and are often built into easily defensible areas as well. In this scenario, the defenders have built their stronghold directly into an imposing cliff face or mountainside. The attacking player has some difficult decisions to make about how to split his forces to crack the defense. And so in this one, the defender gets the castle, but he only gets 50% of the attacker's points. And so that gives it's an interesting conundrum for both sides. And then again, there's more scenery here as well. Here's how to do raids and going and getting supplies. A nice little map deployment area. Again, city sacking, how to spice things up. And then it gives a little bit on how to make some of this terrain, which now GW seems to be all about. Buy our pre-made terrain. Here's some ways of, again, some hand-built scenery. You can use some ideas. And then the last page is, using these templates for how to turn your ships. So again, in sum, a great book overall. It's a way, I think it's a cheaper way to get a lot of the things that GW puts out now in some of their digital products. The Border Princes campaign, which I bought, which is nice to have the interactive, but you can buy this book for a lot less. Blood in the Badlands, a lot of the rules are in this too. So I wish I was able to play more and use more of these rules and plan out a big campaign. I just don't get to play enough. But I would highly recommend this book for those of you that want to spice things up a little bit, if nothing more for some of the ideas it might foster, even if you don't want to do this massive campaign. A great purchase. Again, $30 right now on eBay. So a couple buy it nows. I think it's well worth the money. And then the other book I wanted to highlight, or at least point out, was this one. Like, why are you showing me this, Brown? We're all aware of this. And yeah, this is the big. This isn't the little one. This is the big Warhammer rulebook. And most of us start off getting this, unless you're smart and you buy the thin one. But there's a lot of stuff in this book. It's not just painted figures. There's a lot of things in here toward the back of the book that most people overlook. And I did until recently, and it was kind of going through here, and somebody pointed out to me, way back in the back, if you have a copy, on page 386, there's a section called Narrative Battles. And let me get the super classy bookmark out of the way. And there's just about 10 or 15 pages of things that if you don't want to get the General's Compendium, you have the basic rule book, it's worth going through. And it talks a lot in here about how to spice things up beyond the regular reports. So here's an example, River of Death. Again, just some quick scenario stuff. You don't have to do anything special. Surprise encounters and what this does. I'm going to try to... sorry for the jerky camera. I've got a fancy tripod I'm still trying to learn how to use. So it gives different ways. Again, it's just a different way to do deployments. And then you've got the Darth Monoliths of Zulgazar. And again, you don't have to call it this, but it's a way to use... maybe it's just easier if I pick up book. The Temple of Skulls, the piece of terrain. I know I have one. A lot of people have, and it's just different scenario rules. And if you're, what happens if you're in charge, or if you have a caster on top of the monument. You've got a section loot and pillage. Oi, that's my ale. This is a kind of a city or town one, and you're fighting for control of the Bugman's Brewery in the middle. And let's turn the page. Heroic Last Stand. These are the kind of ones I like to do. This isn't necessarily a test of whose army is better, but it's more about the best general. So this is one essentially. An army is going to get crushed. It's just a matter of how long. So this one's on page 394 in the rule book. I'd like to play this one at some point. I'll get one of my buddies to play it, I'm sure. So the defender only gets 33% of the attacker's points. But there's no restriction on core or anything else. It's essentially you pick 33% of your troops. You're in charge of like a central point here. And the game measures not if you can win, but how long you can hold out. So if you can hold out for, if you only hold out for one to 4 turns, it's an attacker win. 5 to 6 turns, it's a hard fought draw, and then after that, it's a defender win. So then there's rules for despair and things like that. Excuse me. I'm going to pause here and take a quick swig. Then you've got one for rules for mercenaries and how you can integrate them. You got possibility for treacherous troops. And then here's a quick city raising, and how you defend a city versus attacking it. And again, this is one side, the defender only has 75% of the attacker's points. So again, this is not, I think these are more for friendly games. This isn't one I think you would just randomly set up at the beginning of just the first time you meet somebody, but it does, if you play the same person a lot, or you play the same armies a lot, this can add some interesting new features. And I just get some examples. Of course, this is GW made stuff, although this tower isn't. Here's another example, hold the high ground and the benefits for that. Some nice eye candy for terrain. And then this one I have played before. This is the Battle Royale. And I mentioned earlier when I was going over the General's Compendium about how I wanted to find a way for multiplayer games. They've got one in the basic rulebook. And we played it. We had 3 of us playing. And one person gets in the middle. And then they've got a rotating turn set up. So in the magic phase, the guy in the center goes first and casts a spell. Then the next player, and then the next player. And then it goes back to the defending player. So it's a nice way to change things up a little bit. I didn't happen to like this one that much because the guy in the center is just a huge target and he's divided between 2 armies. So I ended up being the one in the center and got, it's just really challenging to be there. I was also Wars of Chaos, which don't do very well at just sitting still. So this one I don't know worked really well, or I would have done things much differently when I played it. But there is an option in the basic rulebook if you have this. Then there's even a bigger battle where multiple armies are trying to control the central Acropolis of Skulls. And you've got one for invasion. And this is the one where, let's see, when the moment of subterfuge and more cunning attacks is over, it's time to unleash a head-on and overwhelming attack. Such brutal invasions are marked by surging tide of invaders bent on crushing all opposition in their way and conquering or destroying everything before them. It is essential to secure a beachhead, clearing the way for the subsequent attack waves. So again, there's a attacker and a defender. Defender has a watchtower, and you can see here. So the attacker only can deploy in this section here, and the defender has this much of the board. And for this one, the attacker can. It says if you have core troops that are destroyed in the attack, it's just you're sending in wave upon wave of attackers. So again, not one for a competitive setup, more just for fun. And then you've got some quick ship combat. So they give scenario invasion of trace. I'm sorry. And so that's that. So again, here's 2 books that I would highly encourage folks to consider picking up. You might already have this one. This one can be found, not all the time, but it's not too bad. If you're looking to add some interesting stuff, some interesting new features to your battles, especially if you play the same players or the same armies all the time. So great way to add some spice. Or if you want to try making your own campaign, I would really like to try to make my own. It's nice not to have to worry about, especially if you've got people like, I've got a friend who plays Beastmen and High Elves, another one who plays Lizardmen, another one who plays Vampires. Well, that may not fit in well to some of the existing campaigns that are out there from GW, so make your own. And you just gotta fudge up some background fluff, and then you can work your way through the tree if you want to make it. You could have 3 battles, you can have 10 battles, whatever you want. So again, hope this was helpful. Please leave comments if you don't like it. I apologize if I had some kind of flipping things to the camera. I'm still working out the best way to do book reviews. You could probably just could have just listened to this if you wanted to listen to me talk. Hopefully not hack too much in the camera. Or if there's particular things like, hey, Jason, I really like the rules for ships. PM me or email me or whatever it's called, and I can pass you more information on it. So, again, hope this was helpful, and happy wargaming.